Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, what am I talking about here? Reading the wrong subject off my little low-grade college students, okay. I must be one of those low-grade students I'm about to talk about. So, I was just looking at some numbers in not only Australia, but also the United Kingdom and the United States, which outlines the level of student debt that's held. Now, this is where the government has either underwritten the loan or directly loaned money, depending on the jurisdiction, to or used some sort of a quango to loan money to students. Now, I guess there's a few things to consider here. The first is, even say in Britain, there's the student debt, which they deem as unrecoverable here at this point. The student debt, the unpayable or student debt that's not being paid, is $300 billion. That's US dollars, 300 billion. That's an astonishing sum. And how can it be so much? You ask. Well, there are a few factors that sort of come together here, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But that effectively is the same situation, whether it be in Canada or Australia or the United States or Britain, where there is this massive unpayable student debt that's in one way or another, directly or indirectly, guaranteed by the government. So this has caused universities to be very careless and cavalier with spending. Universities are now hotbeds, as we all know, of activism, and this activism is very generously funded and supported by the universities. They're giving free access to all sorts of facilities to engage in globalist activism, climate change activism, mass migration activism. This has all been generously funded by most, if not all, universities in the West. So they're not putting the money to good use. They're also paying astronomical salaries to senior university staff. The rate of inflation for salaries for the senior university staff is more than double the rate of inflation. So and double the rate of overall wage inflation. So senior university staff are doing very well. Even do-nothing jobs like the dean or the chairman of the university, where really you're just a fucking figurehead. They're handed out to political buddies and mates with multi-million-dollar salaries and so on. At one university, the diversity, equity, inclusion director is paid $500,000 a year, and so on. And these are all posts that are given to insider people. They're not advertised on the job boards or something like that. So a tremendous amount of corruption and patronage and so on is created by this, which is always the case whenever vast sums of money congregate in a given area. There's always armies of people who are wanting to tap into the root and become a parasitic organism, just taking money out of it and putting it in their own pockets, but producing nothing in return. But coming back to the university, why are the debts so huge? Well, it kicked off, I guess, in the 90s, where this very left-wing view that to have a university education is prestigious. It gives you benefits and advantages in employment, for example. If you've got a good education, you'll get a better job than someone who has very little education. And this is fair enough. But at that time, a very small number of people were going to university, and they were studying quite rigorous courses. So having a degree or a master's or a PhD was considered with some sort of reverence. You must have worked very hard, and you must be very bright to have achieved that high standard, that high academic standard, which was largely true. You're always going to get the rich guy who gets his wastrel son or daughter a nice degree because they give a good donation to the university. But those numbers are very, very small, absolutely tiny. But for the people that were going to university and getting those degrees, they had to work hard to get them, and they were accordingly appreciated. Now, that didn't mean that you didn't get idiots who could get a degree, or they may have specific skills in or a capacity to pass an exam or something like that, you still have those people. But for the main, it was people who had those qualifications were held in high esteem, and in my view, justifiably so. So now the left sort of viewed this differently, in the social engineering equal outcome fantasy land that they exist. They'd say, well, hold on a minute. If a degree, if you have a degree and you're treated with respect and deference, and it's prestige to have one, why don't we make sure that everybody has one? Everybody has a degree. Then everybody can be treated with respect and with the dignity and with the reverence and so on. So what we'll do is we'll re-engineer the higher education system so that everybody can have a fucking degree. Wow, equality, equity, equal outcomes. Wow, we've discovered nirvana. What paradise awaits us. All we have to do is stuff a degree in everybody's pocket and we're good to go. So that was pretty much the mentality that was driving it. Why shouldn't the black lesbian have a degree? Why not? Why not? And if you've got a problem with that, you fucking Nazi. So this equal outcomes equity thing. So, but how do you do that? It's all very well to say that's the nirvana and that's the paradise, but how do you actually achieve that? Well, you achieve it by lowering the standards, of course, because people that achieve academically, achieve to a higher level, are, they're the brighter kids. I'm just going back to my own time in, like, say, senior high school. This was before all the affirmative action stuff really kicked in. There weren't that many really bright kids. There are only a few. And that's the same in whatever field of endeavor you go into, whether it's business or in the boardroom or in the, the college studies or it doesn't matter, in any field of endeavor. There's only a very small number of people who are above average bright. And, I'm thinking, say out of I'm thinking of say the final year of high school. This is graduation to university year. There's 80, 90 kids, I think, in that year, because they used to cull it fairly substantially back then. If you weren't, they'd cull you heavily at year 9, they'd cull again at year 10, they'd cull again at the end of year 11. So if you even made it into senior high school at the time, you were already pretty good. So the ones that went to university, though, out of the 80 would be, we were a small group, so 12 maybe, no, not even that many, ended up going on to university. They just were starting to introduce courses like peace studies and things like that back then. That was just beginning. So some kids slipped into that, I remember. But, that was hardly a rigorous course, for fuck's sake. So anyway, in order to get the big numbers, and they wanted pretty much 60 to 70% of kids that started high school to end up going to university, so they could all have this prestigious degree. So they could all be treated with respect. The only reason that the dumb person doesn't get treated with respect is they haven't got a degree. If you give them a degree, then they got treated with respect. And if you've got a problem with that, you fucking Nazi. So all these people were being swept into university. They had to lower the pass mark and lower the bar. The bar was very high. I remember for and it was also strictly cut off. I mean, I wasn't bright enough to get into medicine, but there was a kid who I think you had to get like 85% minimum. That was the cutoff point to get into medicine. And this kid got 83 or something like that. He was devastated because he missed out. I remember I'm looking at his face now as he was telling me. I can, for some reason, I can remember that him telling me he was absolutely aghast at having missed out, especially given it was such a near miss. But there was quite a few bright kids that year who were going for medicine, and so he the number of places, they didn't expand the places back then. So there was for example, there was 100 places. You either did or didn't make the grade. That was the end of it. But that's changed now. That was the end of it. But that's changed now. So I was looking at the pass mark to get into a lot of universities now. For these are things like gender studies and African American studies, or Black history studies, that sort of stuff. The pass mark that you need to only get 15%. 15%. I mean, to even contemplate getting to university. Certainly when I was doing that sort of stuff, it was 65%. It was like a minimum. You weren't getting 65%. That was it. You didn't even have a snowball's chance. But now it's 15%. So kids are getting waved through into university. Now these are kids that flunk junior high school. They flunk senior high school. There's no way they can get into university on any sort of academic merit, and then they're being put through into these bullshits, like gender studies and all that sort of thing. Now, one or two of the gender studies people are going to get picked for, if they really, really are passionate in their hatred of Western society and straight white men, they'll be given ideological jobs in NGOs and government departments. But there's only a very small number of them will get that, and they have to really hate white people with a passion for that, and hate straight people. And so they'll get a job. Maybe they'll get a job in the divorce courts, or those sorts of things, or in diversity departments, or maybe they'll be hired as HR operatives and this sort of thing. But there's not that many jobs in that area, so most of them will go into low-paying jobs, and they're too dumb to do anything else. And they'll be given a degree, of course, because they'll be waved through as part of an affirmative action equity program, but they'll be too stupid to write their name. Now, I've seen some of the papers that the thesis or even master's papers that some of these low quality students do, and I'm aghast at how bad it is. I mean, holy fuck! If there was a second or third year high school kid handed that paper in, I'd flunk them. It's that bad. And yet they get distinction passes and all this sort of thing. I've also, interviewed, say, engineering students where they're clearly, they've been gifted the degree as part of an affirmative action program, and their standard, they can't answer any engineering question or solve any engineering problem as part of a practical aspect of an interview process. And they take, especially because they want to give lesbians in particular, they like giving lesbians these engineering degrees. That'll show those damn straight white fucking male Nazis. So at interviews, though, they're very chip on shoulder when they're asked a question, which is almost any question, by the way, that they can't answer. They shrug this. Well, it doesn't matter. I can go on the internet if I want. I don't need to know anything. I'm entitled to a job. What are you, a misogynist, fascist, Nazi, racist? And so on. So this is the standard of people that the affirmative action degrees that are given. So there's a vast array of affirmative action degrees given to people that are effectively unemployable in any sort of way. Now, the other thing, I guess, too, is that low IQ people are quite easily radicalized, much more easily radicalized. They come from probably less fortunate circumstances, the single mother and this and that and the next thing. So they see the world through the glasses of lack of privilege, lack of access, and an angry, unstable sort of type of background. So they'll be far more prone, not all of them, but many of them will be far more prone, especially when they're subject to 3 years of intense radicalization. They'll be far more prone to seeing the world as it's an evil, terrible, fascist, Nazi, misogynist, patriarchal system that has to change. And the reason I know it is so bad, evil, fascist, Nazi, but the reason I know that is because I'm not managing director of the bank or president of the bank. Now, if I was president of the bank, then I know it wasn't. But because I'm not, it must be bad. And those sort of attitudes, and sense of entitlement of I should be entitled to a very well-paid job that allows me to lead a very good quality lifestyle and have all the creature comforts and all the gadgets that wealthy people have. And if I don't have that, then it must be something terribly bad. So we have to tear it all down and start again. So these low IQ kids, these are kids getting 15, 20% in an exam. I mean, these are kids that will be kicked out of high school years ago in a merit system, they'd have been kicked out of high school at the age of 14, and they'd go off and maybe do a trade or just get a job and then face reality. But instead, their exposure to reality is delayed by 10 years. But because they now have a degree, which gives them, as they see it, equal standing with someone who has actually earned the degree, they're not making a distinction. I've got a fucking degree, you've got a degree. I'm equal to you. Well, no, you're not. You were gifted the degree, but Billy Bob actually had to work for it. So these people then go out into the workforce and they can't get jobs or they get lower paying jobs. Now, in Australia, at least, if your income is below a certain threshold, you don't have to start paying back the loan. And so as these people are getting, I think it's set at something like, I don't know, three quarters of the average wage, or some setting like that. I think it is maybe 2/3. I think it's 3/4 of the average wage. So as long as they're under that threshold, they don't have to start paying it back. But because they can't get a well-paying job, they've got no real incentive to pay back the money or to be in a situation where they'll be obligated to pay it back. So it suits them to work at jobs that pay less than the average wage or less than this threshold. So if they're offered, for example, if they're offered 5 days a week at the local, a coffee cafe, then as a barista or something, if they're offered 5 days a week, I only want 3, because if I work 5 days, then I have to start paying back that loan, which means I actually will make less money than if I work 3 days. So there's quite a substantial disincentive for these people to be in a position to pay back the loan. Now, on the other side, they argue, with some justification, by the way, they argue that, well, why would I start paying back the loan and to have less money in my pocket? If I get a really well-paying job, sure, I'm happy to pay back the loan because then I'll be doing well at the same time. But in anything less than a really well-paying job, I'll be worse off. So why the fuck should I pay that back? And anyway, I'm entitled to a really well-paying job, prestigious job in a nice office, with a great, really cool social scene and that sort of stuff, and all the staff amenities later on. I'm entitled to all that. If I don't get it, then fuck yeah, I'm not paying back the loan because you told me if I got a degree, I'd be a respected person getting a great job and so on. So there you go. Now on top of that, the amount of people who have degrees, where it might be 2 or 3 in every 100 had degrees 50 years ago. Now, half the population's got a fucking degree, and amongst or 40% plus of the population's got a degree, and amongst younger people, it's like 50-55% have a degree. Now, okay, they're bullshit degrees, but nonetheless, that they have degrees and they're swanning around, expect, well, I've got a degree, so you better damn well treat me with respect. I got a degree in how to hate straight white men and how to hate Western society. That qualifies me for, and this sort of thing. So that they're not only unemployable in a skill perspective, but they've been substantially radicalized. And I'll give you there are community colleges that do things like, say, human resource courses. And there's a substantial difference between the community college HR operative and the university HR operative. The community colleges, it's a 12-month, like a diploma thing. And so they pretty much stick to the knitting. There's not as much opportunity or desire to radicalize the kids. They're putting them through fairly quickly and giving them they're not giving them a good education. They're just taught really to follow checklists. Just follow the checklist. Right, tick box 1. Now go to box 2. Tick box 3. So it's quite basic, and they're quite stupid people. But nonetheless, they've got the diploma, and because they've passed the box ticking certification type thing. But with the same person doing the same job, but from the university, they've been intensely radicalized. They've been encouraged to go out and placard wave about climate change, fight the patriarchy. Nazis are everywhere. You've got to fight them, and you've got to stop them. You've got to make sure that black lesbians only get the job, and these sorts of things. So they've been educated or radicalized rather to a very intense level, which again makes them unemployable in the real world. Only businesses or companies or government departments that are themselves in a state of ideological fanaticism would even dream of hiring people like that. So you've got very low IQ people with bullshit degrees who've got substantial debt that they can't pay back. And this is, if you look at, again, if you just look at the amount of debt that say in Britain, and you're looking at like something like $2 trillion of debt in the United States, 300 billion in the United Kingdom, in Britain, and over $1 billion in Australia, and $1.5 billion in Canada, and so on. So you add up all this unpayable student debt and around the place for bullshit degrees for low IQ kids that should never have gone to university in the first place. And has it created this nirvana of equality? No, it hasn't. Far from it. The people that said this would create, everyone having a degree would create this equal society, now claim society is less equal than it's ever been, which I would agree. If you look at distribution of wealth throughout the Western world, the globalist World Economic Forum flunkies and stooges are doing very, very nicely. Everyone else, standard of living for everyone else is declining. It's going down the shithole. So this is where we're at here. But I was staggered at the numbers. Now, what do governments do? They've either got to force these low IQ wastrel kids into paying it back. That would kind of be hard. Or they've got to put the cost onto the taxpayer. Well, that's an option too. Or they've got to find some other way. But because they're bringing in vast numbers of peasant immigrants, these immigrants in turn are competing for the very same jobs that these low IQ college kids would otherwise do, which is artificially depressing wages at that lower end, and making it even harder for these college kids to pay back the loan, assuming they ever really could service a loan like that. So here's some things to think about, but it just shows how the insane policies of equality and equity and where they lead us. The idea that if everyone has a degree, we'll be an equal society was insanity on steroids to begin with. And I went to only a few hours of a conference quite some years ago where there was some leftist educators, I think they were teachers union hacks and goons, were talking about equality, and they were saying, well, look, if everyone's got a degree, then we'll achieve equality. And someone who obviously wasn't of that sentiment got up and said, look, if you're fixated with equal outcomes, which they were, if you're fixated with equal outcomes but without merit, that is the illusion of equal outcomes, then it's going to take us to a bad place. Now, at the time, I didn't really follow it. I thought, oh, yeah, okay, interesting, but didn't really think much about it. It wasn't something that I was, concerned about at the time or consumed with. So I didn't really think much more about it or dwell on it. But it came back into my head recently, and I remember that. And really, the point was quite clear that in the end, they've destroyed any possibility of the sort of equity that they claim to be pursuing by these sort of idiotic policies in this instance in regard to education. I mean, look where it's left. Trillions of unpaid debt, and all of this artificially pumped up and inflated prices. University lecturers that were just nothing other than two-bit radical activists. It's destroyed everything that was meritorious and based on quality, and that's all gone with it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.